So with the chain of infection, you have to have these 6 components in order for this chain to work. There has to be a pathogen that's going to be infectious and can induce a disease inside of an infected individual. The next factor that is needed is the source of the pathogen, or also known as a reservoir. So this is where the pathogen is going to originate from. There also needs to be a portal of exit from where the pathogen is able to escape its reservoir. So an example would be a virus that is kind of residing in the nasal cavity. And its portal of exit is going to be when the individual with that virus in his nasal cavity sneezes. So the sneezing mechanism is the portal of entry or portal of exit for that pathogen. The mode of transmission is going to be the method by which the infectious agent is going to be transferred between the infected person and then the the new individual that will be infected. And then you have to have portal of entry, so the pathogen has to be able to make its way into the new individual who was going to become infected. And then that specific individual needs to now become a susceptible host. And so all 6 of these components make up the chain of infection. Let's talk a little bit about the reservoirs of infections. Sources in which microorganisms that elicit diseases in patients reside are known as reservoirs of infections. We have living reservoirs, and we also have non-living reservoirs. With living reservoirs, these are going to be essentially any organism that is currently alive. And so these reservoirs are also kind of pretty synonymous with what we refer to as a host. We try to avoid that terminology because not all of these infectious microorganisms are considered parasites. Sometimes they can reside in these reservoirs without affecting or impacting the living organism. And so there's humans, pets, animals, insects, arachnids. All of these are different examples of living reservoirs that are out there. The most important reservoirs, though, are those of humans, because in our society, a lot of our disease transmission occurs through contact with other humans. So it's important to know that out there's a number of living reservoirs, and these living reservoirs in our population are referred to as carriers. So a carrier is a person who has been colonized by a particular pathogen, but the pathogen is not eliciting disease in that person. And so the person is simply just kind of serving as a shuttle, and it's that person is carrying the pathogen. Individuals that are referred to as passive carriers are individuals that have a pathogen inside of them, but they never actually develop the disease that is caused by the pathogen. So we refer to these individuals as passive carriers. Incubatory carriers are any individual who has the ability to transmit a pathogen during the incubation period of an infectious disease. Now, it takes a lot of diseases don't just occur instantly. There is a specific incubation period in which the infectious agent has to kind of fester and take its toll on the patient before it really develops and spreads the disease that it causes. And so an incubatory carrier is a person who has the ability to transmit a pathogen as the infectious disease inside their body is incubating or sitting and resting in the incubation period. So if that's the case, then we know that symptoms are going to be exhibited, say, within the span of 48 hours. So between the pathogen being present in the body in that 48-hour window before infection starts, you can have an individual who has the capabilities to spread the infectious agent to another individual because they serve as an incubatory carrier. The next type of carrier is that of convalescent carriers. These are individuals that are recovering from infectious diseases, and during the recovery, they are actually a carrier of the pathogen. So they can still transmit the pathogen to anybody that they come into contact with. Active carriers are individuals who have recovered from the disease, but the pathogen is still inside of them, and it's always going to be with them. So active carriers typically are always, they're not going to be impacted by the disease anymore because they've recovered from the disease, but they're still a carrier and they can still directly transmit a pathogen to another individual. So one of the most interesting stories I think that really highlights the significance of carriers is the story of Typhoid Mary. It's kind of a long story with Typhoid Mary. Mary Mallon was a immigrant from Ireland, and she moved to the United States and served as a cook in the early 1900s, primarily in New York. And she had contracted typhoid fever when she was younger, and she recovered from it. And even though she recovered from it, she still was a carrier of the organism called Salmonella typhi, which causes typhoid fever. And this organism resided inside of her gallbladder. And whenever Mary produced stools or fecal material, she tended to pass the Salmonella typhi organism in her feces as well. She didn't practice very good hand hygiene practices. She didn't wash her hands because she didn't believe in it. And because of it, she was able to transmit the Salmonella bacteria from her hands after using the restroom to the food that she was preparing while operating as a cook in the kitchen. And she did know that she was doing this until after so many outbreaks followed Typhoid Mary wherever she went, kind of as the saying goes. Everywhere that Mary went, typhoid fever was sure to follow. So the New York State Health Department kind of pinpointed her as the original source of the typhoid outbreak because anyone she came into contact with acquired typhoid fever. As this happened, Mary was arrested and she was jailed, but she was only released if she made the promise that she would never again serve as a cook. But you got paid a lot of money in the 1900s to be a cook, and so the profession was very alluring for Mary Mallon because of the money that was involved. So instead of agreeing to her promise to never serve as a cook again, she simply just changed her name and started working at other establishments such as hotels and restaurants, as well as even hospitals. So some of the main resources where infections can be, we know today infections can be picked up. And so she was arrested again when she was caught, and then they placed her in quarantine inside of a hospital so that way she can no longer infect or cause outbreaks of Salmonella typhi. So that's the story of Typhoid Mary, and she was among the first individuals to be classified as what we know today as a carrier, and she represents the ideal carrier example. So an example of a human living reservoir of infection. Now, aside from humans, animals also serve as reservoirs of infection. Infectious diseases that humans acquire through contact with animal sources are referred to as zoonotic diseases or zoonosis, which is a term we defined earlier. Zoonotic diseases can be taken or acquired from or through direct contact with an animal, An individual can inhale or ingest a pathogen from an animal, or an individual can inject the pathogen or receive an injection of the pathogen through an organism such as the arthropod group, which we know to be essentially insect vectors or arachnid vectors, or even some crustacean vectors that can transmit these diseases. So some examples of zoonotic diseases are going to be rabies, which is transmitted through bites from cats, through bites from dogs, bites through animals that are rabid. And another example is that of Lyme disease, which is transmitted through the bite of a tick, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Some other examples, again, right now we have the Zika virus being spread through mosquitoes. Malaria is another kind of example of zoonosis. There's a lot of different examples out there where animals serve as reservoirs. In those reservoirs, eventually you see the pathogenic organism leave the reservoir and gain entry into a new host that will be susceptible to the infection. So I said an example of this is rabies, so let's kind of take a look at the infectious path of rabies. Here's a picture of a rabid raccoon. So the first thing that happens is that the raccoon is going to be bitten by an animal that's rabid. So this could be another raccoon, this could be a bat, this could be a cat or a dog, or just another animal. And so once the raccoon is bitten by an animal that has rabies, the rabies virus enters the raccoon through the saliva of the organism that bit the raccoon. So the virus will start to spread throughout the nervous system of the raccoon, and it will start impacting the spinal cord as well as the brain. The next step that happens is a 3 to 12 week incubation period where the raccoon's body starts to succumb to the rabies virus. And after incubation period, that raccoon is it's a funny word to say, raccoon is no longer going to exhibit signs of illness during the 3 to 12 week incubation period. And so once the virus starts to make its way to the brain of the animal, then the brain will start sending signals, which causes the host organism to generate the virus and allow that virus to multiply inside of the host system. And so the virus, as it multiplies rapidly, will start to find its way to the salivary glands of the raccoon. And then the raccoon will start to exhibit signs of the disease. And these signs are going to be things like fear of water, acting a little bit odd, and after coming down with the illness, the organism that's infected is going to typically die in a manner of 7 days after contracting the virus. So notice that this is kind of a very long process of things that take place in order for this virus to infect this raccoon with the rabies disease. And this diagram here just kind of marks the distribution of where the virus has been observed. So this is a distribution of major rabies virus variants among wild terrestrial animal reservoirs. So you can see that we have skunks, foxes, raccoons, and mongoose on here that all are indicative of host organisms that can transmit the rabies virus. So most of rabies virus looks like it's going to be infecting skunks more so than raccoons in a good number of states in the U.S. So that's just kind of the distribution.